You're listening to the Staging Sips podcast with Lori Fisher. This podcast is dedicated to helping real estate staging CEOs build healthy businesses that grow, flow, and thrive. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. I am so happy that you're here today because we have a really fabulous interview with me and Rachel Moore of Madison Modern Home. She and her mother, Robin DeCapua Moore, have owned and operated their staging business in the Los Angeles area for a decade at this point, and she has a lot to share in this interview. We go through their origin story, and we talk about lessons learned, struggles, systems they've put in place to make things better. So whether you are at the growth phase of your staging business or you are in accelerate or even leverage, there is something for you to learn in this episode. So enjoy. We will put all of the links in the show notes for you. And I'm just happy to be able to share this valuable resource with you. All right, here we go. On to the interview. So, hey there, Rachel Moore. How are you?
I'm so good, Lori.
I'm so glad you're here today. And I know just based on the little bit that we were talking just before we hit the record button, that this is going to be really robust and a great episode for those business owners that have kind of gone through that growth phase and started to move into the accelerate phase, that what I call the accelerate phase, where you have started to bump up against your own capacity and you need to hire, and you realize that you may not have your systems in place in order to get ready to hire, or you're fully in that accelerate zone where you've got team and you're realizing that systems and processes need to be cleaned up and you may or may not have right hires. So I'm excited for you to bring that to us today. So I think maybe the best thing to do is to start off with you sharing a bit about Madison Modern Home and your journey and where you are right now as a business.
Yeah, I would love to do that. Let's see. I think it was 12 years ago. It might have been a little bit longer than that. I was working, kind of doing freelance graphic design, I want to say, but that was really just advertising my services on Craigslist and kind of crossing my fingers and hoping somebody would contact me to design a logo for them. I was also working as a barista. That was really, my main source of income. And then my mom, Robin, was working in marketing in healthcare. She kind of got disillusioned with the corporate world, and I was a creative person that wasn't really being challenged. So what happened? Okay, so this was 2008 or so. Is that right? I don't know. That was when I first started getting really interested in design blogs, Apartment Therapy, Design Sponge, Domino magazine was really big at that point. And my mom was getting into all that stuff too and reading Elle Decor. Just we would get together and have coffee and just kind of talk about trends. And we would go to vintage stores together in LA. There used to be a lot of fairly reasonably priced vintage furniture stores that kind of specialized in mid-century modern furniture. And I was obsessed with lamps. We were really into textiles. We were buying fabric and then making pillows. She bought me a sewing machine for my birthday one year, and we just got really kind of obsessed at the same time. And it was funny because I was already, I wasn't living at home. We were definitely, in kind of, I think after being a teenager and kind of being a pill and my early adulthood, we separated a bit just because that's kind of what happens naturally. And then we just kind of came back together, and it was very sweet. And I think after helping one of her friends who is a real estate agent help her prepare her home for sale by kind of re arranging the furniture and kind of giving her some ideas of stuff to buy for like not a super lot of money, and like going to Home Goods and kind of doing that thing. That particular person said, you should start a staging business. And then that idea kind of just snowballed over more coffee and magazine dates, blogs, and I don't know. It sounds like it's like a meet cute, but for a business, and it just kind of happened.
Yep. Gosh, I remember those days too of like, is this something viable? Is this something we can do? How do you even start it? Like, yeah, it's
Yeah.
wild. And so that was 2008. So you started your business like right around the time of the real estate crash, or did you start it after?
It was after 2008 was I would say is when we started kind of getting into design and just becoming really like into it. It's 2023, so 20 no, I'm like seriously, you don't have to
About
put this.
15 years. 15 years? I think so.
So maybe 2010. Maybe
Gotcha.
2010 is when we like actually started doing stuff, and then like got a storage unit,
Mm-hmm.
and then we were working out of a storage unit and renting furniture from Court or this other furniture rental company called Fashion Furniture. And but they, their scheduled delivery times were like between 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. So a lot of times we'd just be sitting around the house like waiting for the delivery to come. It was, that's what we had to do. So that's what we had to do. Um, and then we started buying some furniture. We always did. I say we did the paperclip thing. I don't know if you're familiar with that story of the guy that
Yes.
has the paperclip and then he trades it for the pen, and then he trades the
Yep.
pen for the this, and then it just keep, and like we literally did that. One of the first stagings we did for a very successful real estate company that I will not mention by name, but we had a project for them and we needed a desk for this office, this room that we were going to stage in an office, and we didn't have a desk and we didn't have the money to buy anything, and you couldn't even buy anything anyway. Like, you can't really go into a store and like buy a
Sure.
desk,
Just buy a desk. Yeah. Yep.
so we were driving around, I think freaking out, like not knowing what to do, and then there was like a desk like that was just like someone had put it out like on the side of the road, and
Oh my
I was
God.
like, pull over. She like pulls over like, and get it, go to Home Depot, get some paint. And I think I painted the desk on site at the property because it had to be done like, at like 5 p.m. And I remember it was a really hot day, and the paint dried really quickly because it was so hot. So like that's the kind of thing that
Yeah.
we would do. It's just like, what are we doing? I don't know. We don't have any money,
Yes.
that type of thing.
It's so like I love that you're sharing that because I think that people see where you are now and they think, "Oh, that must be where I should be," or they don't think about all of that, like what you had to do to like hustle basically in the beginning of your job and or in the beginning of the business. And I think when people we have such a mentality of people not wanting to share the struggle and not wanting to share those stories. I think in general, like on social media, it's like rare that people will show the hustle and the grind a little bit. And I think people think maybe they're doing it wrong or there's supposed to be a better way. But we used to laugh. I had a Prius when I started this business, and my team was like, someday you're going to pull a full-size sofa out of that thing because, we'd have to load that thing up to get it
Yes.
on site. And I might have to take like 5 trips back and forth to a storage space
Yep.
or the Target or whatever. And like we laugh about there was one time we had somebody wanted their outdoor done, and it was a realtor who'd give us a ton of business. And I was like, all right, I was like, we got to make this happen for her. So I found a table at Target, and I joked that I had like T-Rex arms because I was pushed so close to the steering wheel because this table was so long that I could
Yeah.
only move my wrist to move the steering wheel.
Oh, that's
And it was just it was like so fun to be able to deliver that to her. She had no idea of how crazy that was, but it felt like such success. And I just like think those stories are so great. We all have them. Yet,
yes.
those of us who have, much more established business, that's how we started. So I love that.
Yeah.
And I love the idea of the trading the paperclip because that's so true. And I think that to some degree continues to happen as you get bigger and grow. Like if you've got some, new ventures you want to do, there's a little bit of that, but still, I don't know, to me, that still happens. But now, so today you're so much further in, and now you own all of your own inventory? Do you continue to rent? Like, what is your story there?
We own all of our own inventory. We do not rent anymore. Our inventory is set, like comes from so many different places. We're like the collected, like eclectic, layered, different eras and different, you know, textiles and textured, just
Yeah, yeah,
it's
your work
all.
is so layered and gorgeous. It's
Thank
beautiful.
you.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's just it just doesn't look like it's staged when it's got that kind of curated, um like we always say that we want our stagings to look like somebody who's very well read and well traveled lives there. So
mhm.
like so much of our smalls are things that we've either sourced from thrift stores, flea markets, garage sales. I was taking a ceramics class and I was making some real funky looking stuff. And I just put it all in, like, I just put it in the inventory. I'm like, well, this is weird, but it's kind of
Yeah,
like interesting looking. So I knew that I would be able to like have a place to like put all my weird stuff that I was experimenting with. But you take some weird thing and you put it like very confidently, like,
yeah.
on a open shelving or something, and like it looks like it's, in a museum or something. You just have to have the confidence
Yes,
to
yes.
place it just so.
And the confidence that should the realtor or homeowner be like, what's that thing that you are like, you totally own? You know? But no, I love
Yes.
that. And I love that what you said is you want your staging to have that feeling of somebody well traveled and well educated and well read. I think that's really an interesting approach to just your aesthetic in general, to be thinking about like the avatar, like they call it the avatar, in marketing, but to
Hmm.
have your
Hmm.
avatar for your actual aesthetic direction and aesthetic look for your brand, I think is so great. So if there are people that are out there still new and learning, like that's a little gem right there that Rachel's just given you, is to really think about like who is that buyer? Because a lot of times we say we want to appeal to everybody,
Hmm.
but we all do take on, like I've got a student who works with me in the Staging Business School Accelerate program, and hers is all about people who love art and really good art. And so that's how she distinguishes herself. And so it's like, I think and somebody else is like, they want to appeal to the traveling nurse. And so that's like when they're doing their short-term rentals, that's the person they're appealing to. So there's like lots of touch points of peace and quiet and calm and all of that. So that's a really great way to approach your staging. And I'm not surprised that it's that thoughtful because you can see it in your work. It's which is beautiful. So now I'm curious because you have accumulated so much from all over, and we had talked about the fact that you are really like you're a systems driven person, which I love. And we talk about that a lot here in the Staging Sips podcast, and all of that is how important systems are. So, how do you have an inventory system that you use, or how do you track
Yes,
all of that, or do you not?
yeah, Stage Force, we are actively inputting all of our inventory into Stage
Okay.
Force right now. It's funny because up until now, that was not one of the systems that we had been using. And that is um, something that I felt a little bit sensitive about because we weren't doing that. We were kind of driving ourselves kind of a little bit crazy because everything was up here. I'm pointing to my head.
Yep.
um, for both of us, and we weren't really able to see everything unless we were at the warehouse. And we have this system that we've been doing for so long, which is just kind of like the way that we've been doing it. And I was just so used to it, and I'm such a visual person and I'm such a tactile person that it seemed like, no, this is the way that I want to do it. This is the only way. But it just isn't. Once you get to a certain point, you need to know what you have, and you need to know what you can use in a project when you're not on site at your warehouse.
Hmm.
It's just taken us so long to input everything because we're so busy doing like the stagings,
Hmm.
and it's not a creative process doing that.
Right.
So it's just taken us a really long time. But that would be the one system in which we're not fully up and running in. Everything else, yes.
Okay.
So
We could definitely talk about this. And I do want to ask you though, because you're in it right now and you're kind of working through that inventory system, because I know it's something that people talk about a lot, is like, did you start with a category? Like how did you start with that? Is your plan to put everything in or only the big stuff? And
our plan, what we started with, the way our warehouse is organized is kind of like from the furthest back. We have like the lightest weight things. So the things that are furthest away from the loading dock are the pillows, and then the bedding, and then the small things like decor and everything, then lamp, and then it kind of like
yep,
goes back toward the dock, side tables, dining chairs, and then also we have 20-foot ceilings in our warehouse. So we have like the pallet racking. We don't use a forklift or anything, but our racking is, you know, well, it's to code, but it is like, up that high. It's not hitting the ceiling, obviously, but it's tall. Then we have the big rolling ladders and everything. So we kind of started with like whatever we had in house, like, oh, all the side tables. And then we moved to dining chairs. And then we moved to nightstands or, whatever other small accent furniture. But then we would get like a staging of, and then we were like, okay, let's try to catalog everything that's going out to the staging. And then we
hmm,
would do that. And then we would have like 3 stagings in a row with no days to plan to do the stage forcing in between the plowing and the packing and the planning, and we would get derailed.
yeah,
And now we were like, okay, our slow season usually happens around the holidays.
yep,
We're like, let's get it all done during the holidays. But then we got really busy,
busy.
and we're like, what the heck? So it's just one of these things where like it's going to take a long time, I guess. But we do like we as far as like our employees, we've set up with them kind of a system, so they're going to be able to take over. And this is where like being a perfectionist, like I would consider myself to be, a perfectionist in recovery. I'm
Hmm.
dealing with my, sometimes almost crippling perfectionism.
Hmm.
I
Yes.
like that idea that don't let perfection be the enemy of progress,
Yes.
because in my mind I'm like, okay, no, the photo of the chair needs to be, I need to have like a white background, and it needs to be like this exact like 3/4 angle, and I'll see the photo that my associate has taken of it. I'm like, no, I don't like this photo. Like, you can't tell. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Just freaking upload the photo and like do the like who cares? And even like
Yeah.
they'll type in like, mid-century modern chair. I'm like, that's not a mid-century modern chair. That is clearly a postmodern chair. I'm just kidding. I'm just like, that type of perfectionism is what's like keeping me from like getting,
Yeah,
the work done that needs to get done. And this is just me being perfectly honest and very frank because I want everyone to know what, I think all creative people can suffer from this,
absolutely. I think not only
especially.
creative people can suffer from that, but also when we own our own businesses, we feel like if we're not perfect, we lose business. And that's just not
Yeah.
true. And
Yes.
so and it's not, it's a little bit of like that scarcity mindset and all of that. But
Yes.
I would imagine that everybody listening is either totally in the depths of their perfectionism or they are on their path to recovery. Um, because I just think it goes hand in hand with like we're creating these spaces that absolutely look perfect too. So it's like
Yes.
it's so fascinating. So I love that you're saying that. So okay, and you brought up a good point though. You have how many team do you have that you that work in the background of the business who are supporting you?
Yeah. So right now it is Robin and my mom and I are the two like designers. And Ernie, my husband, is like our manager. So he does all the client communication, he does all our scheduling, all our contracts, he manages our budget, all that stuff, the stuff that I don't want to have anything to do with. And then we have, so over the years, we've experimented with like having like, a junior designer or associate designer, or whatever, like having another person to like help do like the styling and like doing the beds and stuff. And then we've had someone help doing like like packing and art hanging and kind of the like repacking stuff at the end of the day and like all that stuff that kind of like, annoying like back breaking type of stuff that, I was like, I can't do this like packing anymore. Like I'm just like I'm sick of it. But it didn't really work. Like my mom and I like to be we don't dispatch any people to our stagings. Like we do all of them. Like we're
Mhm.
there on site for every staging because we love
That's what you love to do.
doing it. Like
Yeah.
I've done it before where we had a designer working with us who was a wonderful person. I was such a control freak at that time because that's another thing that I'm recovering from is, I think those two things go hand in hand.
Hmm.
Oh, I said, okay, here's the plan. Here's this furniture. Like, you just go do it. It was like a 1-bedroom condo. And, she executed it awesomely.
Hmm.
It was great. But I was like, but I want to go. Like, I want to go. I want to be there. Like, I don't, like, it didn't, it wasn't satisfying to me. Um,
Hmm.
So we now don't, something happened. Oh, we had someone who she couldn't deal with the commute anymore. She left. And I was like, oh crap, we need to hire another designer. And I was like, wait a minute, I don't even know that we do.
Right.
Cause like I was so like, how do I put it? I don't want to sound like I'm crazy, but I wasn't letting her grow. I wasn't allowing her to grow
Yeah.
because I was like just too in the mix. Um, so we're just like, you know what? Maybe we don't need another designer. Maybe we just really need is like more like moving help. So we used to have an outside moving company do our moving. We
Hmm.
recently switched to in-house moving. So we hired several people to do that. So as of right now, we have 4 movers and we have the 3 of us. So it's 7 people total. As of
Gotcha.
right now, exactly this minute, there are 7 employees. And then my stepdad, he is a wonderful handyman guy, and he helps us with all sorts of like random stuff, like, oh, this chair leg broke, or we
Oh, perfect. Yeah.
outdoor, like these patio tables that we use for outdoor dining, they get ruined because we put a plant in the middle and then they're outside and it gets rained on, and then we get it back and the finish is all messed up and there's this big black stain from like whatever thing. He just refinishes the table for us.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
so
great.
yeah, so but seven is the number right now. And it's just kind of like, you know, like everything is just so like in flux and everything is always changing, and like at the time I think we needed the other designer, and we that's what we really felt was what we needed, and we had that other moving crew. Now we need to do, because of the AB 12, or I think it's called, we have to have our own in-house movers, so we adapted to that, and now our warehouse is like super organized because we have them on almost a good chunk of the of hours, um like organizing the warehouse, and they're fixing furniture and they're doing stage force and
That's
keeping
great.
everything, you know really, our warehouse has never been more organized than it is right now.
That's great. And I think what you're saying is so interesting too, in terms of the evolution that you go through as a business owner, because, you know, it- like it sounds like you wanted to grow the staging department, thinking that involved bringing on a new designer, and then realize, well, wait a second, maybe my like one of my favorite things, or my favorite thing to do, is to do the staging. So you wanted to stay there. Whereas like for somebody like me, I loved the staging, but I was like, I don't want to do the staging all the time because I love doing this education stuff. I used to have a blog every week and I loved doing that. I loved being out doing marketing and sales. And so it was like, for me, I remember thinking I would hire somebody to do that stuff. And I was like, no, but I really like that part. And I actually don't want to be in the field every day. But like the idea, which I think is such a beautiful thing about running your own business, is that if you're open to the possibilities, you can redecide, which is what it sounds like you did. You're like, oh, that's what this experience is. Oh, that's not really what I want. So, like, how can we troubleshoot to to make it work better? And I think that's really wonderful. And I hope people hear that too as like a little gem. Like you can head down a path that you think is the right one because somebody else has said that's the way you do it, and it might not be the right path for you, but there's so many other avenues if you're just open and creative to what it can look like. I think that's fantastic. So you mentioned that you have lots of systems that are dialed in. The inventory wasn't one of them, but it sounds like you're on that path. I'm curious about like the systems that you have that you're like, there's like nobody, probably no other business that has it as dialed in as us. Like we're really good on this. Like, what do you?
My favorite, well, I think just warehouse organization is one of my favorite things. When we first moved into our warehouse, it's 7,000 square feet. And when we first moved in, there was nothing in it. And we had to invest in bolted and non bolted shelving.
Mhm.
Um, and I was so scared of making a mistake in like designing like the floor plan of the warehouse, because it needed to be, like, a lot of that shelving needed to be bolted in to
Mm.
the cement. Um, but I don't know, it I guess it just worked out. I mean, I did have to, like, I did it in a CAD program. But like I said, everything that's the lightest weight stuff is all the way in the back, and then the heavier it gets toward the front. Um, One of my favorite things that I've ever done is, so we have our uh, the kits that we bring, like the tool kits that we bring to restaging.
Mhm.
We have like it's like a rolling, one of those rolling bag thingies, and that's where we keep like the larger stuff, like the glass cleaner and the little broom and paper towels and soap and all that stuff. And then the toolboxes we have the hammers, nails, measuring tapes, museum putty, all that stuff. And when we first started, uh, the person that we had working for us would always forget, something from the list.
Mm.
And I would be like, hey, like we're missing this tool. And they'd be like, oh, sorry. And you get, sometimes you don't need every tool you have in your box, but when you need it and you
Yeah.
don't have it, it
Yeah.
sucks because someone has to like run out to Home Depot or whatever. So I was just like tired of that happening. So what I did is I made like this layered um a map, basically like a visual, like a key where every single layer of the kit is visually um represented so that anybody, even if it's their first time putting together the kit, they can look at this very visual representation of what needs to go in it. There's like an outline of each thing. So the first layer is two hammers that like lay next to each other. And we use those like orange Homer boxes from Home Depot. And
Okay.
then above, on top of that is like the furniture touch-up pens. And then next to that is two measuring tapes. And it's all visual. So anyone, even if you've never, even I could pull a stranger off of the street and be like, hey man, come in here, put this together. They could do it. And I know that every single thing that I have that I need to be on site is going to be in there. And
Yeah.
if we ran out of it, like the way that we have our, like we have a little shopping list. If we run out of something, you put it on the list, and we make sure we get it. That's my favorite thing. It's just like it's the most foolproof
Yeah.
thing that I've ever made in my whole life. I can rely on it.
Yeah. And it's so great when you come across that. That's so funny because we have, so our version of it, we call it it's the magic box because the magic box has everything in it. But yeah, so we have, it sounds very similar. And, we have an Amazon wish list that has every single item that's in the magic box. So like when we put the request in when we're running low on things, but look, it's amazing when you strike upon it and you're like, oh my God, it's like, I think we talked about it. It's like it's just magic. It just
Yes.
the friction in something goes away. So I'm curious with that specific thing, how did you come up with that idea?
I think I was just trying to like make it so that it was um accessible to anyone and everyone, and then it would be like foolproof. And that, because I would sometimes pack the kit and I would forget something. And
Mm,
I'd be like, oh, how could I forget? Like with a list, even if you, because the thing is, like, when you get used to doing something over and over again, it becomes this rote thing. And you're like, oh, yeah, yeah, that's in there, that's in there, that's in there.
mm,
And then sometimes it wouldn't be in there and it would be my fault. And we would get there and I'd be like, I'm just like really annoyed with myself. And
yeah.
the thing is that, like, one time we were doing, it wasn't a staging, it was actually like a little interior design thing where my mom and I were installing a gallery wall at a client's house. And we had everything we needed, except we didn't have the earthquake putty. And
Mm,
there was this one frame or a couple of frames that were just like the hanging hardware was just like, it was making it so that they weren't hanging straight and they kept leaning. And all we needed to get it perfect was just a little bit of putty to keep them in
yeah.
place. And it just looked silly because it wasn't all lined up. And I was like, this is ridiculous. I'm not letting
Yeah.
this happen again.
Yeah.
And that was kind of like, but that's like this birth of ingenuity has to come from some sort of failure.
Yeah.
You can't, if you're always doing things perfectly, you're never gonna like learn anything. So, the I have a friend who owns several restaurants, and when I was telling him about, like, my employees not putting the right things in the thing, he was like, you gotta have like signs and like lists and stuff. You got to have those things everywhere,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And that was what it was like. Oh, okay, just like, you know, keeping people like on task and like keeping them informed, and expectations are right here.
Yeah.
And unless you have that kind of like available at all times, it can get lost because people
Yeah.
are human.
Yeah.
It's a very human, to err is human.
Yes. Yeah, and it's interesting because I talk about it. I have one episode, and it's all about the fix it protocol, and I talk about like how the quiet times of your business are really a good time to go through this fix it protocol, and it's like you basically are identifying issues. If there's anything that's quick and easy that you can solve, like that's the X, cross that off really quickly. But then there's other stuff that just is going to take a while to implement, and what are the solutions for it? But it's like to your point, it's really the things that don't go well that create the best solutions in your business, or the things that you do repeatedly that you're like, yeah, I'm so over. There has to be a better way than me just doing this like manually every single time. Or, I think that's, an amazing thing. I think we were talking about this too. I was saying I'd love to know like, what's one of the biggest lessons you've learned in business? Because we talked about like, or, something that seemed like a really kind of, I don't know, debacle that
Mm-hmm.
you learned something great from, because you were talking about how important that is to have that kind of contrast.
Let's see, big debacles. Well, I think that this is like some minor like things that have been like, I thought that sometimes if a client came and did like a walkthrough with us and like didn't like something or had a comment about something, I would like internalize that and
Mm.
kind of like make it this thing. And I'd be like, oh, like I can't do that anymore. I need to be more, you know, this way. And make, I would make um, that person's opinion like change the way that I would do things.
Mm.
And then like because of that, I had like kind of all these like rules that I had like set up for myself that were just like completely arbitrary, purely subjective rules that were just kind of like these like unnecessary parameters. And based on like feedback from like one person.
Mm.
I don't know if anyone else can relate to
Oh,
this.
goodness. Be in the Facebook groups. Yes. Lots of people can relate, I think.
Okay, cool. Because like that can
Ha-
feel like lonely. So I mean, I think trusting that like just because one person has an opinion about what you're doing, that is not the opinion of everybody else. And I guess like the way that I'm posing this to answer your question is like I think I really boxed myself in for a really long time, as far as like being kind of having like a formula
mhm.
as to like how when I walk into a room I take my notes and I well, this is one of the systems that like that started out as like a way to streamline the process, but then it ended up kind of backing our designs into a bit of a corner because it became so formulaic. And then now I feel like what I want to do is like kind of like burst out of that box. And I feel like this intense like creativity spurt that I don't even think would have happened unless I had kind of boxed myself in.
Oh, interesting. Yep.
So I don't know, like it's being kind, with yourself and being like gentle with like, I'm a person and like I am going to make mistakes and I cannot please everybody. I can't please everybody.
Right.
That's just like, that's probably the number one thing that I have to take away, when, because there is no stager that hasn't had some sort of like feedback from a client that was like, not great. Like it
Yeah.
just, there's no way that I show me that stager.
Right, exactly.
And it hurts, it's doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
Does not feel good when you get some like email when you're trying to like, watch TV or something and relax at the end of the day and you get some email that's like really long and you're like, oh
Yeah.
my God.
Yes.
I think we've all gotten that email. It's like, can you just like
Yeah.
call me instead of like, writing all these bullet points? Um, and I'm not sure if I really even answered the question.
Well, I know, I think you did though that, and I guess I'm curious now, um, now being further along, having more projects under your belt, having more clients on your roster, how do you handle when people do question maybe a decision you've made, or does it not happen as much anymore? I just would be curious for those people who are like, would love to hear what maybe a more mature business owner than them would how you would handle, or even just a fellow business owner in general.
Yeah, that is a really good question. I think in the beginning it was like, you know, stop the presses. We must like do everything that they say,
Yeah.
And a lot of times that was, because I was like, sometimes it would be like I did not have a bigger rug or a bigger
Mm,
sofa and I had to put this sofa in there that maybe was not really exactly the right scale. So if I got that email at the end of the day that was like, do you have a bigger sofa? It would be like, ugh, like if I knew that it wasn't up to
yeah.
snuff.
Yeah.
But sometimes you have to take that risk because maybe you just don't have a bigger sofa at
Yeah.
the time. Um, so that was in the beginning. Now I would say it is very important. We have a lot of repeat clients. That's just, they we
Mhm.
we love our clients. We try to work with them as far as like scheduling and like trying to get them in and making sure that our repeat clients are the ones that, we get on the schedule.
Yeah.
So if a client that we have a really good relationship with asks us to make a change, I always need to um make sure that I am considering like what is the potential cost of saying like no
No. Mhm.
to this client, like, and unless it's like I'm just trying to like think of like, because it used to happen quite a bit
Mhm.
um when we were just new. And I think it was just because we, were nascent designers and we were um just didn't have a lot of money. We didn't have like tons of inventory. So,
Mhm.
right now, like if someone wants to switch out a sofa, like I have a lot of sofas.
Mhm.
But then like I probably didn't have like, I probably didn't have as many to choose from. And I was always using the best piece that I had for the project.
Yeah.
So now, I mean, it's kind of like if I have a client who's like new and I've never worked for them before, and they have like a request, and they're like, "Hey, like everything looks good except we really don't like X. Um, can we switch it out?" Um, if I'm just trying to think. Sorry. I think we just kind of we do honor the requests. We just kind of do because it doesn't really make sense not to, like, unless it's like really ridiculous. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like sometimes it's just like ridiculous. But we want more clients. I don't know. I don't know. I'm inclined to say yes to them, especially if I have the time, especially if I have like the available inventory and I want to keep the relationship. But
Yeah.
that's not necessarily the approach that everyone should take. That's just kind of what has worked best for us. And one of the things that we're really known for is like our customer service. So I mentioned that my husband Ernie is the front facing person for our business. He's just like really, really like chill and like wants to like, work it out and like,
Yeah.
hey, like, let's figure this out. So you want this, we don't actually like have that right now. How about something like this? So, like coming to, a solution where we don't have to like run out
Yeah.
and necessarily like buy something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that being flexible is really important because I think that one thing that keeps our clients coming back to us is that we're easy to work with.
Yeah.
Like we're flexible and we're like always willing to like figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
Like we
Yeah.
had a client, um we were booked. We were booked and we had a client that needed more time because they were like kind of flipping this house and it just wasn't done. Like it's not going to be ready for you to come in. I'm really sorry, but there's construction materials everywhere you're not going to be able to stage. And we're like, okay. And Ernie had to call a bunch of different people. Like, okay, I gotta call this guy, ask him, like, can we come in and stage your project a little sooner? He's like, well, the bathroom's not going to be done. And we're like, oh, it's okay. We can do the staging and then we can come back the next day and do the bathroom after that. Just being really
Mm-hmm.
flexible. And I think that our clients really appreciate
Yeah.
the willingness and the flexibility. And I think like that's kind of like speaks to the being in the community, like being like a small business that's really like in the community. We're like,
Mm-hmm.
we know who we're working with. And how do you get real estate is just all freaking word of mouth. I don't know.
Yeah.
We get our clients because our other clients tell people about us.
Yes. Yep.
That's how it works. So like
Yep.
if you're cool and you're flexible and you are willing to like make it work, I think it really goes a long way.
Agree. And I think even if you can't, like this is another thing that I think about a lot. Like sometimes, like even if you just sound like you're willing to do it, like that
Mm-hmm.
sometimes is enough for people versus absolutely not or whatever. Like I think we've had times where we're like, "Oh yeah, that's totally fine. We are booked out. We can't get there for another few days. Is that okay?" And
Mm-hmm.
usually the answer is like, that's fine. Or if it's like pictures are happening or whatever, like then we may have to do a little more, you know, trying to bend over backwards. But sometimes it's like, okay, we'll go ahead and do photos and maybe we just won't use the picture that has that particular whatever it is in it. And then you find out the house sold almost immediately. But
Right.
because you acted willing to partner with them and help their business, or, like I think that is another thing too, like that we do. So it's like, and I think also it's also kind of gauging, okay, who's going to be the person that requests this on every single job, every single time, that makes our lives a little bit harder all the time? Or
Mm-hmm.
is it like a one-off, they're new to us, we're figuring each other out, or it's like you said, a long-term client that, rarely says anything, so it must really be a bother. And like, what does that long-term cost look like if you whether it's to your own burnout because the client is always super demanding. And have you ever fired a client, speaking of that?
It seems to kind of happen organically that it just like fizzles out. We had a client who he was just it would the project was never ever ever done. We would get there and it would be just people working that like,
Mm,
just paper on the floor, ladders everywhere, and we'd be like, oh my god, like I don't even know how many times it happened. And we
yeah.
would have to
Like, do you
work.
understand how staging works? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. And he just kind of stopped I think he just started working in like another area. And we
Mm.
weren't gonna fight like no, we haven't oh no, you know what? We did fire a client once. But we didn't like it didn't happen in the way it was like a mindset thing. Basically, we decided because during COVID, we had to really get really lean.
Mhm.
Um, and we like did a spending diet. We're like, we cannot spend any money.
Mhm.
Um, we had to lay off. Well, we brought her back later, but our wonderful associate at that time. And it was just me and my mom and Ernie doing everything, plus our movers. And we were like, but then we got busy. So we were really like small, like low staff. We got busy and we're like, wow, we can't take on every job that is
Mm.
being asked of us. And a lot of the jobs at that point were like, there was this one client who wanted us to do he wanted us to do this like really massive, like mansion-y type house that was like semi-occupied and like had a lot of like, ornate, really cheesy furniture in it. And he was a jerk. He'd always been a jerk. Um, he was like, "Hey, I want you guys to do this project." And we're like, like we can't do that. We can't do that project because like it's just, we don't have the inventory to like work within that existing design. And he was like,
Mm.
"Come on, I really need you." And we were just like looking at each other like, "No, like this guy's a jerk. We've had bad experiences with him. We don't want to do the project." We're like, "Let's just say no." And then that's when we kind of put together this idea of having like, who's our ideal client? And
Mhm.
that wasn't anything except like a mindset shift
Yeah.
from like, and that's like you touched on this like idea of the scarcity mentality
Mhm.
versus like the abundance mentality. And if you could look at it like, oh, I don't necessarily want to do every staging that comes my way because sometimes it just really doesn't make sense for my business.
Right. Yeah.
And like being able to get to that point, and that is, that's that turning point for, the business owner. And it's a scary place because
Yeah.
you have to
Oh.
have the
Oh.
confidence to say, you know what,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna I'm not gonna do this one. Maybe you get a funny feeling or
Yeah.
like a weird vibe, or you learn that your instinct is to be trusted.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because that you say that. I remember we had a client that she was an early client to me, like came early on and was like a big advocate. But what happened was as I built team, and even in the beginning, it was always she needed an urgent appointment. It needed to be at night. It needed to be on the weekend.
Mm.
And, in the beginning, I was like so happy that somebody was hiring me.
Yeah.
And so I was doing those things. And then as I realized like I had a family life and I didn't want to be on the weekends. I had two little kids at the time. I started to kind of say no to her. And then as I brought team on, not no to her, but I began to resent her
Mm.
appointments. And then when I brought team on, she really only wanted me always. And I was like, I have amazing people that, have worked with me for like 3 years. They're incredible. They're better than me. Like my senior stager, Lisa, is so much better than me. And but she continued to make every project seem so difficult and always wanted edits and changes. And at that point, we had sold so many houses for so many people. I was like, what am I doing? What am I doing to my poor
Yeah.
team? Like, because they
Mhm.
were feeling the stress of it. And I finally just I felt bad, but we kind of I came to heads on a project because I was going on vacation and my team was going to be installing it. And she was not happy because I did not like give her enough notice or whatever. But, and that was it. We have been like our team, it's like weightlifted. And this is going back
Hmm.
several years now, but it was such a profound difference. And we kept saying that letting her go makes space for better new people to come in. And that's exactly what happened. Um, we ended up onboarding some amazing, like our realtor clients are so wonderful. We're so lucky. But it just was such a hard decision to make for that reason, and kind of tolerated for so long some difficulty because of that scarcity. Like, what happens when that realtor is gone? That
Right.
revenue, we can depend on it. She's got, multiple transactions a month all the time. And, they're good, the good projects, but they're just everything's chaotic and rushed and last minute and special favors. And it was like, oh God.
I'm
Yeah.
getting anxiety just hearing about this person. Yeah. And it's funny because every stager has that particular person.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like
The
to your, I think you said this when we were talking earlier about like, again, you sometimes need that person to show you like that
Yes.
when it's good, show you the good, because you don't necessarily know how good you have it until you've got a scenario or a client or something that just isn't optimal.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
that's like that goes back to that thing, like, what what was the negative thing that ended up being like the most positive thing? Because
Yeah.
you're just like, we will never ever stop learning in this business.
Right.
It's just gonna always be, another lesson. And that's why when things go wrong, it's really not bad. When something goes wrong, you're like, oh well, like I'm learning this thing, or now I'm like realizing like, oh, this is something that we can like change and like make better. And I think that's the most like exciting and rewarding thing about being in business.
Hmm.
And like, especially with staging, because there's so many different like elements and then micro elements of like the whole business. It's just like
Hmm.
such a crazy business.
Yeah.
And like, you're talking about like your car, and like, just how many times have you like shoved like just like, your car is just always filled with all sorts
Full.
of random stuff. And your warehouse, we just have like this like front room that's just like filled with all sorts of like weird, it's just a crazy business. It's not for the faint of heart.
No, it
You
is
have
so
to
true.
really, there's, there it's I'll just say it's crazy. It's nuts. But I
Yeah.
love it. I would not I would never want to do like anything else. I just love it so much.
Yeah. And it is like at the end of the day, being able to help people with, literally, I would say literally and figuratively moving forward, moving on to the next, whatever that is, whether they're a homeowner, an investor, a realtor, like that is very rewarding. And I know, like for myself, at almost 13 years in business, I still get so excited every time we're like house, gets listed on Friday, and by Sunday night they have offers rolling in, and they're like in the open house was bananas. And I'm like, that still is so exciting. It's
Yeah.
like so cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
So no, I agree with you. And I just love this conversation. I feel like the theme of the conversation is all about just growth, just in general, and somewhat like a little bit of like letting go, but also I think letting go and being open to what the possibilities are with anything, whether it's a system, something that isn't working well. Like I think that's the theme. When things aren't working well,
Yeah. Yeah, and
you
like
know?
that being like that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like yeah, the
Yeah.
mentality, seeing things, in a positive light. And how can,
Yeah.
you know, adversity, change us. And also, for the fledgling staging company, this like the social media thing is like all you see is
Hmm.
the polished end result. And it's just so funny. My mom and I always joke about like, all of the crazy chaos that it
Yeah.
takes when you're loading in, when your crew is like loading in the furniture, you got bins and you got boxes and like all this stuff is like everywhere, and it's pandemonium. And like sometimes
Yes.
agents be like, "Oh, can I pop by in the middle?" I'm like, "No, why do you want to be here in the middle of it? It's
Exactly.
nuts. It's like you're not
No.
gonna like be able to like, see anything." And I don't, the all the craziness and all of everything that goes into like this like very serene end result. Because I
Yes.
don't even ever like, sometimes I'll go, um I rarely, because I don't go to destage the house, like that's the crew, so I never really get to see the house the way that the people that are the potential buyers see the house. Because at the end
Mm-hmm.
of the staging, I'm tired. I'm like, all right, I'm done. Like, I can't even necessarily really appreciate everything that went into it because I'm tired.
Yeah.
So I think I had to go pop by, do something, and I saw at one of the houses, and I saw it in the way. Oh, they had like music. There was like a candle burning, and there was music playing. It was like an open house. I was like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. Like
Nice.
this is the aspirational lifestyle that
Yeah.
they're selling, and I never really get to see it.
It's amazing. Well, and I was gonna say, I don't know if you're anything like me, but I can never appreciate anything I've done like in the moment. Like I literally need distance and
Mm-hmm.
time to be able to
Mm-hmm.
look back and go, "Oh my God, that's incredible." Actually, I
Yes.
used to that happened in early in my business too with like undercharging. Like I'd charge a certain fee and then I'd get to the end of the day and I get it all done. And then I'd look at the pictures online and I'd be like, oh my God, I did not charge enough. Like in the moment, I thought, oh, I way overcharged them
Yep.
for what I was doing. And then I saw it and I was like, wow, like, but it's hard in the moment to like go, dang, we're good.
Yep. Yes. Yeah. No, I can
Oh,
totally relate
so
to
good. Well, before we wrap up, really quick, I'm curious, do you have any like favorite business book that you have read or resource that you have done or a course you've taken that you thought was really, really valuable that you want to share with?
I read this book. I don't like read like a ton of business books, but I did read one book, and it's called The E Myth.
Mm.
E. Have you heard of the book?
Yeah, oh yeah, I talk about it all the time. It's one
Oh,
of my
you
favorites.
do.
Yeah, I
Oh,
love it.
well, that's it. I mean, if you already know, you already know. But it's like the story of the gal with the, what is it, like a pie shop?
Pie business, yeah.
Yeah, and she can't make all the pies herself because she's gonna run herself ragged. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
that point where you need to ask for help. You need to hire other people. So that was like, that was a huge turning point for us.
Yeah,
My reading that book and kind of sharing it and think, you can't do it alone.
right.
It
Yeah.
takes a lot of people, and it's that perfectionist mentality that we have, like, no, I can't outsource this thing because I'm the only one that knows how to do it. Like,
Yes.
you're not, maybe you're not the best at every single thing in the entire world. And we have to be honest with ourselves about that. Hey,
Right.
maybe we're not.
Yeah.
And
I'm not
then,
good at most things. Like I realized that when I kind of did an exercise. I was like, or not, I don't have the interest in most things. Like maybe that's
yeah,
why.
whatever you don't like to do,
Yeah.
maybe someone else can
Yeah.
do that.
Because they're wired so much better for it. But yeah, that book. So we'll put that link in the show notes for that book. Um, because that is a very powerful book, especially like you said, like your terminology there, the fledgling business owner who probably, I know, like me, envisioned that I was always going to be the person doing the staging all the time and answering the phones and doing the books and doing all the emails and all that stuff. So, yeah, I think that's a great book. And then I'll also put the link to your mom's course in the show notes as well for everybody to get that. So I just want to thank you so much. This was so great. I feel like we need like a part 2 and 3 and 45 and
I would absolutely love nothing more than to come back on and chat about all this stuff with you,
yeah,
Lord.
you've given a lot of gems and a lot of great insight as somebody who's been through this whole arc and kind of you're out on the even though I know like seeing like I feel like I'm not on the other side yet in a lot of ways, but kind of on the other side of a lot of lessons learned. I think that's
Yeah.
fantastic. So Thank you
Yeah.
so much, Rachel Moore. You're the best. Everybody follow Madison Modern Home on Instagram. They have a beautiful account.
Oh yes, Matt
Well,
at madmod_home.
okay, we'll put that in the show notes as well. All right, I will say goodbye to you now, and we'll see everybody on the podcast. That was your sip for the week. We'll see you next week. Bye for now. Thank you so much for listening to the Staging Sips podcast. If you love what you've learned here today, please take a minute to rate and review it so more staging business owners can find us. And if you want to learn more about how to market and grow your staging business more strategically, I'd love to see you join us inside of the Rethink You Accelerate Mentorship Program. It is open enrollment. You can get more details at rethinkhomeinteriors.com/rethinkyou. Would love to see you inside.